Marcus Bennett was a 36-year-old accountant living in Denver, Colorado. He had worked diligently for over a decade and had managed to save exactly $50,000 in his checking account. It was March 2026, and the stock market had reached new record highs on an almost weekly basis. Marcus understood that he should invest his savings to build wealth for the long term. Yet every financial article and market commentary he read warned that stocks were overvalued after the long rally and due for a pullback any day now. He was convinced that buying now at these record levels would be a foolish mistake. Marcus decided the smart move was to keep his $50,000 in a high-yield savings account until prices became more reasonable. He had no idea how costly that decision would become over the coming years. A few months later, at his office, Marcus watched his colleague Lisa celebrate another strong month in her investment portfolio. Her account was up nearly 25% since she had bought in the previous year. Lisa had invested her own savings right before the big rally, and now her money was growing faster than she had expected. Marcus felt a twinge of jealousy, mixed with regret, about his own cash sitting idle. The market had climbed another 12% since March, and his $50,000 could have been worth $56,000 by then. Still, he told himself that a major correction was inevitable, and he would buy the dip. Marcus believed that waiting for lower prices was the mathematically superior and safer strategy compared to buying at current highs. He had no clue that the real cost of his approach was the precious time his money spent not compounding at all. By June of 2026, Marcus could not take the FOMO any longer. He finally transferred his entire $50,000 from savings into a low-cost S&P 500 index fund at the prevailing market high. For the next 3 months, the market continued its upward climb without any major pullback. His new investment grew from $50,000 to nearly $58,000 by early fall. Marcus felt genuine relief and even a bit of pride in his decision. Buying at what he thought was the top had turned out okay, and the market had not punished him for it. He started to believe that his cautious approach had still worked out in the end. The short-term gains made him forget about all the months his money had sat on the sidelines, earning nothing. Marcus thought his story had a happy ending, because his investment had grown a little bit in the short term. But the real issue was never about the first few months of price movement. His fundamental mistake was in how he calculated the true impact of his timing decisions and what his money could actually become over 9 full years. The numbers he had in his head did not match reality. Even after he invested, he still carried the same flawed logic about market highs and expected returns that had caused him to wait in the first place. That logic was about to be exposed. The short-term growth Marcus saw had masked a much deeper issue that went all the way back to his initial decision-making process about market timing. Here's the problem. Their math was completely wrong. Marcus was far from alone in his cautious decision to wait. Millions of hard-working Americans across the country faced the exact same dilemma in the spring of 2026, as the market kept hitting new record highs. Teachers, engineers, nurses, and small business owners alike had saved diligently, but chose to keep their money in high-yield savings accounts. They all believed that buying stocks at these elevated levels would be taking on too much risk. What seemed like a smart personal choice was actually being repeated on a massive nationwide scale. The individual hesitation was quietly adding up to a collective financial disaster for ordinary families trying to build wealth. The problem had grown far beyond one accountant in Denver. It was silently affecting millions who wanted nothing more than a secure financial future for themselves and their loved ones. The true scale of this widespread hesitation is absolutely shocking. 48 million Americans who delayed investing their savings at the 2026 market highs ended up leaving over $2.1 trillion in potential wealth on the table by 2035. That enormous figure represents real lost opportunities for vacations, home down payments, college funds, and comfortable retirements across the country. It is money that could have transformed millions of lives, but simply vanished into thin air. For someone like Marcus, with exactly $50,000 saved, the personal cost of waiting even a few months was often around $187,000 less by 2035. The gap was life-changing. These numbers reveal how one seemingly responsible decision to wait can multiply into a devastating financial setback when it happens across millions of people at once. This silent destruction was being caused by one powerful, invisible enemy that most people never name. It is called the timing trap, the dangerous belief that you can successfully wait for a perfect lower price before investing your money. The timing trap feels incredibly logical and responsible, especially when the market is at record highs and every headline warns of an imminent correction. It promises safety and smarter entry points for your hard-earned savings. Yet every single month spent waiting inside this trap costs your money precious time that it can never get back. The longer you stay trapped, the more expensive it becomes, because compounding works against you instead of for you. Millions were falling into this trap without realizing its true power. It did not announce itself loudly, but it quietly robbed people of the extraordinary long-term growth they had worked so hard to achieve. Sleep Easy felt a deep sadness seeing so many good people caught in the timing trap year after year. He knew the regret would hit hard when they finally calculated what those waiting months had truly cost them. He thought carefully about the best way to help his audience escape this trap forever. Understanding the full pain first would make the coming solution far more powerful and memorable. This exploration of the widespread problem and its massive hidden cost sets up everything that follows. The contrast will turn confusion into crystal clear understanding very soon. Before diving deeper into the actual math, it helps to know why Sleep Easy brings such a valuable and different perspective to this exact issue, and what you will walk away with when the video ends. Sleep Easy has spent years studying the real-world mechanics of how ordinary people actually build or lose wealth through their timing decisions in the market. He has reviewed hundreds of detailed case studies from everyday investors who hesitated at record highs and later calculated the true long-term cost. What sets his understanding apart is the way he connects simple human stories with the cold math of compounding over full decades. He does not rely on fancy predictions or complicated models, but focuses on patterns that repeat across thousands of real lives. Sleep Easy has personally watched friends and family members repeat the same timing trap mistake year after year. This first-hand insight allows him to explain the problem with clarity and empathy that comes from genuine care for his audience. His deep knowledge comes from running the exact numbers on what happens when $50,000 sits idle for even a few months at critical market moments. This video delivers a completely unique perspective that most finance content misses entirely. Instead of vague advice to just buy the dip or wait for better prices, it shows the precise, real-world math of investing at highs versus delaying even briefly. Sleep Easy cuts through the noise by using everyday comparisons that make the power of time in the market instantly understandable. The focus stays on the emotional journey, from confusion to that satisfying moment of clear insight. Viewers will discover how, starting right now at current levels, can still create extraordinary results by 2035 without needing perfect market timing. The approach is fresh because it prioritizes action over endless analysis. This perspective reframes market highs not as dangers, but as normal starting points for powerful long-term growth when you understand the real rules of compounding. When this video ends, you will clearly know exactly how $50,000 invested at the 2026 market highs can realistically grow to $480,000 by 2035. The full mechanism behind that growth will finally click into place. You will also walk away with one single powerful action you can take immediately to secure that same compounding path for your own savings, starting this very month. No more hesitation or second guessing. The insight connects directly to what is happening in the markets right now and gives you calm confidence instead of fear.
You will understand why time in the market beats trying to time the market every single time.
With that foundation of clarity established, let us now move straight into the core math and see how this real compounding journey actually works in practice. Picture your $50,000 as the daily cost of buying expensive takeout coffee versus owning the coffee shop itself. Every month you delay investing is like continuing to pay premium prices for someone else's profit instead of building your own. When you finally buy the shop with that $50,000, it starts producing fresh revenue and growing value right away. The machine works 24 hours a day, turning beans into steady compounding income without any extra effort from you. The real magic happens because the shop not only serves customers today, but reinvests every dollar of profit back into better equipment and more locations over time. That is exactly how your money behaves once it is put to work in the market. Investing at the 2026 highs is no different from buying the professional machine at full price. It begins generating returns immediately, and those returns start working for you instead of sitting idle in a savings account. Let us look at the exact math that changes everything. Your $50,000 invested today does not sit still, waiting for a perfect future price. It immediately begins earning market returns that compound year after year. Over the full 9 years, from 2026 to 2035, that initial amount grows through steady reinvestment of gains. The process is simple, yet extraordinarily powerful once the money is put to work without hesitation. The key number that flips your entire perspective is what happens when time is allowed to do its job uninterrupted. Every single day, your capital stays invested adds another layer to the snowball effect that builds real wealth. This is not about guessing the perfect entry point. It is about giving your money the full 9 years it needs to multiply through the natural power of compounding returns in the market. Sleep Easy points out the critical difference that most people miss entirely. The first year of growth on your $50,000 creates additional capital that then earns returns in the second year and every year after that. By year 3, the original amount has already multiplied enough to accelerate the entire process dramatically. The compounding effect snowballs faster and faster as more money works for you each passing month. This is why starting right now at current market levels matters far more than trying to wait for a lower price later. The time your money spends growing cannot be recovered, no matter how cheap stocks become in the future. The everyday comparison to owning the coffee shop reveals the truth. Delaying even a few months means your shop opens later and misses months of revenue that would have compounded into something far larger by 2035. Here is the number that completely transforms how you see market highs forever. That same $50,000 invested at the 2026 peaks grows into $480,000 by the end of 2035. The math is straightforward and repeatable across decades of market history. Your capital earns average annual returns that are reinvested automatically, creating exponential growth over the full 9-year period. $480,000 is not a fantasy outcome, but the realistic result when time in the market is given the chance to work its magic. The difference between waiting and acting now is measured in hundreds of thousands. This specific figure shows why the timing trap costs people so dearly. Every month of hesitation reduces the final amount by thousands of dollars that compounding would have added automatically. Sleep Easy explains that the real compounding path has nothing to do with predicting short-term dips or waiting for perfect timing. It is about putting your money to work immediately, so every year of growth builds on the previous one. The everyday coffee shop analogy makes it crystal clear. Owning the business from day one lets revenue compound into new equipment and expansion, while the saver keeps paying for someone else's success. This math proves that market highs are simply normal starting points for long-term wealth creation. Your $50,000 begins its journey toward $480,000 the moment it is invested. With the core mechanism now fully understood, we can see two completely different paths that start from the exact same $50,000. One path waits, and the other acts immediately,
with dramatically different results by 2035.
Priya Sharma and Carlos Mendoza were best friends and colleagues who both turned 34 in early 2026. Each had carefully saved exactly $50,000 over the previous 5 years from their jobs in tech and education. They often discussed investing over coffee, and both knew the stock market had reached record highs in March of that year. Yet they made completely different decisions about what to do with their money at that exact moment. Priya decided to invest her entire $50,000 right away into a low-cost S&P 500 index fund. She believed time in the market mattered far more than trying to time the entry point perfectly, even at highs. Carlos, on the other hand, was convinced that buying at record highs was too risky. He chose to keep his $50,000 in a high-yield savings account and wait for a significant market correction before making his move. The difference in their knowledge and beliefs about investing created two completely separate journeys, even though they started from the exact same place. Priya understood that market highs are normal and that staying invested builds real wealth over time. Carlos believed the common advice that you should never buy at market peaks and that waiting for a better entry point was the smarter strategy. This single belief shaped every decision he made for the next several years. Priya committed to a simple long-term plan of holding her investment and automatically reinvesting every dividend that came in. She ignored daily market noise and focused on the 9-year horizon ahead. Carlos kept checking the market every week, hoping for that big dip to appear. When small corrections happened, he still hesitated and felt justified when the market recovered without a major crash. When small corrections happened, he still hesitated and felt justified when the market recovered without a major crash. Sleep Easy points directly at the core difference between these two friends. Priya embraced the real compounding path from day one, while Carlos fell deep into the timing trap discussed earlier. One person understood that the cost of waiting includes both missed gains and the lost power of compounding over multiple years. The other kept hoping to buy at a discount that might never arrive at the right time. This knowledge gap is not about intelligence or access to information, since both had the same starting amount and opportunities in 2026. The difference came down to action versus hesitation. What happened over the following 9 years shows just how expensive that hesitation becomes. Compounding works its full magic on one path, but not on the other when action is delayed. By the end of 2035, the results of these two different paths were absolutely shocking. Priya's $50,000 had grown to $480,000 through consistent compounding and staying fully invested the entire time. Carlos, who started with the exact same amount, ended up with only $145,000. The gap between them reached $335,000, all because of different decisions made back in 2026. The early years, from 2026 to 2028, were especially powerful for Priya because she captured the full compounding effect during a strong market period. Carlos missed most of that growth by staying on the sidelines. Even when Carlos finally invested in late 2027, he had already lost years of potential growth. His habit of taking profits early further broke the compounding chain that could have helped close the gap. Sleep Easy is genuinely shocked by how large this gap became from what seemed like small differences in knowledge and action back in 2026. $335,000 is life-changing money for most families. This is the real cost of the timing trap that so many people fall into without realizing it. The person who acted immediately and stayed committed to compounding ended up with more than 3 times as much wealth. The lesson here is not that you should blindly buy at any high. It is that once you understand the math of compounding, the cost of delay becomes far more expensive than the risk of buying at current prices. Now that we have seen the dramatic difference between these two paths, it is time to discover the single most important insight. This insight can help you choose the right path for your own money, starting today. After seeing how two people with the exact same $50,000 ended up $335,000 apart, the single insight becomes crystal clear. The real compounding path has almost nothing to do with guessing the perfect entry price.
The insight is this: your money needs more time to grow through compounding far more than it needs a lower price. Starting today and staying invested beats waiting for a better moment almost every single time. Priya did not have secret information or special timing skill. She simply gave her money the full 9 years to work its magic, while Carlos gave his far less time because he waited for conditions that never arrived exactly when he wanted. This truth changes everything about how you should think about investing right now in 2026. The clock on compounding only starts when your money actually enters the market and begins working. The insight that time matters more than price is what separated the two paths. Priya started her money tree growing in March 2026 and let it mature for the full 9 years. Carlos kept his seeds in a drawer, waiting for perfect planting weather that never came. Every month that passed while Carlos waited was a month his money was not participating in the powerful growth that turned Priya's $50,000 into $480,000. That hidden cost is what no one calculates when they say they will buy the dip later. The market does not care whether you bought at a high or a low 9 years earlier. What it rewards is how long your money has been working inside it. This is why the best time to plant was years ago, and the second best time is today. In 2026, this insight is urgent because many people are still sitting on cash, waiting for conditions that may never come exactly as they imagine. The clock keeps ticking, whether your money is invested or sitting idle. Here is the one specific action you can take right now to start walking the real compounding path. This week, open your brokerage account and move the money you have ready into a low-cost, broad market index fund. Once the money is invested, turn on automatic dividend reinvestment, so every payout immediately buys more shares and keeps compounding. Then, set a simple calendar reminder to check your investment only once per year, instead of every week. That single action of moving your money in and turning on reinvestment is what starts the clock. You do not need to pick individual stocks or time anything perfectly. The broad market and time will do the heavy lifting if you give them the chance to work. Do not wait for the next dip or the next piece of good news. The insight we discovered shows that the cost of waiting is almost always higher than the risk of starting at current prices. Your future self will thank you for acting this week. Right now, in June of 2026, the market sits near record highs, just as it did when Priya and Carlos made their different choices. The insight is that this moment is still an excellent time to begin, because 9 years from now, the exact price you pay today will matter far less than the fact that you started. The strong economic trends continuing through 2026 and beyond mean your money has every chance to grow powerfully if you give it time. Waiting for a perfect entry that may never come is the mistake we saw cost Carlos more than $300,000 in lost wealth. This week is the window, not next month after you research more or after you see what happens with interest rates. The math of compounding rewards people who act and then stay patient far more than people who wait for ideal conditions that exist only in hindsight. The single action of investing what you have this week and enabling reinvestment puts you on the same path Priya took. That path turned $50,000 into $480,000 by 2035. Your money deserves the same opportunity starting now. Sleep Easy is genuinely happy because this insight is so simple yet so powerful. You do not need to be a market genius or predict the future. You simply need to start your money working today and let compounding do what it does best over the coming years. The person you will be in 2035 will look back and thank the version of you that exists right now for making this one decision. The gap between doing nothing and taking this single action can easily reach hundreds of thousands of dollars over a lifetime. Markets will go up and down between now and then. That is normal and expected. What matters is that your money stays invested through those ups and downs, so the long-term upward trend of the economy can work in your favor. just as it did for Priya. With this insight clear in your mind, we can now return to the very beginning of our story and see how different Marcus's life could have been if he had understood this truth back in 2026. The final chapter will show you exactly what to do next. It is now December of 2035. Marcus Bennett is 45 years old and sitting in his Denver apartment with his son. He opens his investment app and sees that the $50,000 he finally invested back in 2026 has grown into $480,000. Marcus thinks back to that spring when he waited 3 long months because he was afraid of buying at record highs. He remembers the relief he felt when he finally bought in June and the market kept rising for a while. But now in 2035, Marcus also remembers the video he watched right after he invested, the one that showed him the true cost of the timing trap and the real power of giving money the maximum amount of time to compound. Because he understood the insight in time, Marcus made one important change. He stopped thinking about selling during dips and committed fully to letting his investment grow for the full 9 years without interruption. Marcus realizes that if he had understood the insight back in March of 2026, instead of waiting until June, his $50,000 would have had 3 extra months of compounding during a very strong period. That small difference would have added tens of thousands more by 2035. More importantly, Marcus sees that the real change was not the 3 months. It was the mindset. After watching the story of Priya and Carlos, he stopped seeing market highs as a reason to wait and started seeing them as a normal starting point for long-term growth. Marcus never again fell for the idea that he could time the perfect entry. He simply kept his money invested through every up and down between 2026 and 2035. That single decision turned out to be worth more than any stock pick he could have made. Looking at his son Marcus feels grateful that he learned this lesson while there was still time for his own money to grow. He now plans to teach his son the same insight, so the next generation does not have to learn it the expensive way. Sleep Easy is genuinely happy for Marcus because he took the insight we discovered and actually applied it to his own life. Marcus did not need to go back in time. He simply needed to stop waiting and let compounding do its work from the moment he understood the truth. The $335,000 gap we saw between Priya and Carlos was a dramatic illustration. But even small delays, like the 3 months Marcus waited, have real costs when you multiply them across 9 years of compounding returns. What matters most is not whether you bought at the absolute lowest price. What matters is whether you gave your money enough time inside the market for the long-term upward trend of the economy to work its magic on your behalf. Marcus's story shows us that it is never too late to start walking the real compounding path. The moment you understand the insight and act on it, your money begins its journey toward the future you want. Marcus changed his future by understanding one simple truth. Your money's greatest ally is time, and its greatest enemy is delay, caused by the fear of buying at highs. Once you see that clearly, the decision becomes obvious. If you have money sitting in savings or cash right now, the single most valuable thing you can do is move it into a low-cost, broad market index fund this week. Turn on dividend reinvestment and then let time do what it does best over the next 9 years and beyond. The market will go up and down. That is guaranteed. But the long-term direction of the economy and businesses has always been upward, over periods of 9 years or more. Your job is simply to stay invested long enough to benefit from that direction. The best investment decision you will ever make is the one you make today, and then have the patience to leave alone until it has had enough time to grow into the life-changing wealth you deserve. Start this week. Your future self is already thanking you.